brought to you by the Austin Metropolitan Ministries. In the weeks ahead, you will see these and other programs by various denominations.
He's been called the Martin Luther King of the Palestinians. He's Father Elias Chacour, who's visiting here in the capital city and who is our guest today on Austin Faith Dialogue. Please join us.
This is Austin Faith Dialogue, a public affairs program discussing the important crossroad of religion in life, produced by Austin Metropolitan Ministries in cooperation with KTBC TV. Austin Faith Dialogue highlights the interaction of the religious community with the social and cultural issues throughout our area. Now, today's edition of Austin Faith Dialogue.
Hello, I'm Richard Thompson, pastor of Central Presbyterian Church, and your host for this edition of Austin Faith Dialogue. And today we're pleased to have with us Father Elias Chacour, a priest of the Melkite Church, a body of believers that has existed in the Middle East from earliest centuries of Christianity. Father Chacour was the first Palestinian priest to earn a degree from Hebrew University in Jerusalem. He's now serving a church in the village of Ebeline, northeast of Nazareth, and has led in the building of schools, libraries, and community centers throughout Israel's Galilean region. He's gained worldwide recognition for his nonviolent advocacy in behalf of Palestinian and Jewish civil rights, an effort which has been compared to that of Dr. Martin Luther King here in this country. His life and work have been the subject of a biography entitled Blood Brothers, Palestinian Struggles for Reconciliation in the Middle East. Father Chacour, we welcome you to Austin.
Thank you. I'm very pleased to be with you in Austin for the first time.
And what brings you here again?
Well, I was invited to give some speeches in some universities and to meet with American public and with churches, mainly after the peace signing. And I'm always most interested to keep in touch with American churches and universities.
Right, and here in Austin you have seminaries as well as churches.
Exact, and that's very interesting for me because our hope is mostly in Christian churches in America to speak out for the truth and to speak out for the oppressed without becoming one-sided against the oppressor.
Okay, well, I think we'll get to your message in just a moment. I'd like to focus just for another minute on the fact that Austin Presbyterian Seminary, the Episcopal Seminary, and others in the community here are going to hear you speak directly.
Exact.
But as far as many other folks today on our program is the way in which they can hear a little bit about your background, because I think in introducing you as the Martin Luther King of the Palestinians, it's with the understanding that you have led in a nonviolent form of advocacy in Israel.
Well, in fact, I was born in a Palestinian family, and my village was destroyed in 1953 by the Israeli army. And since then, I am a deportee in my own country, and I always asked, what is the answer to violence? Is it more violent, and instead of having one corrupted person, you have two corrupted persons? And due to the education I got from my family, who is a Christian family, through the experience of the horrors of being rejected and treated as dirty Arab, I concluded that something else should be done. And the inspiration of that came very directly from the life of Jesus Christ for me, who is the champion of my life to go and look for security for the Jews through implementing justice for the Palestinians.
I see. So you do consider yourself to be an advocate for the Jews as well as the Palestinians in that regard?
Absolutely. I cannot conceive any victory of the Palestinians on the rebels of any Jew, God forbids. The security for the Jew is only in giving justice to the Palestinian, and the justice, the partial justice to be given to the Palestinian can never be implemented without securing the neighboring Jew together with the Palestinian.
All right. I think that's a theme that you continue to come back to. I've seen it in your books, and I'm glad to hear it from you directly, because I think that's That's one of the perspectives that's often lost in this country about the tension in the Middle East. And oftentimes it's misperceived that all Arabs, for instance, are Muslim. And you come out of a Christian background, don't you?
Well, exactly. If there is any Christian in Austin or elsewhere, it is because my forefathers were the first to witness what happened to their compatriot, to their countryman, Jesus Christ. They were unable to contain that for themselves, and they went all over the world to share the good news with you folks. And that's why you are Christians. You are our
where
children.
It started, right?
Exactly,
okay.
yeah.
How many generations back is your family in Israel?
Well, we can go back to 10, 12 generations. We know our forefathers, but the Palestinian Christianity goes back to the first Christians ever to exist in Palestine, and whose only missionary was Jesus Christ and Paul and Peter. They are our brothers, more than our disciples or our big bosses of Christianity. They are our brothers. Yeah.
All right, and the Melkite Church is an ancient one in that regard.
It's one of the most ancient churches. It is part of the Byzantine church that existed always in the Holy Land, beginning with the day of the Pentecost.
All right, so you grew up in the northern part of what is called Israel today.
Exactly.
At the time that you were born and grew up there, it was called Palestine.
Yeah.
Right.
I was born in Palestine, and at the age of 8 years, part of Palestine was taken by the new Jewish immigrants who came from Europe, Russia, from elsewhere, escaping the horrible persecutions in Europe. And they took part of my country and made of it Israel. And thus I became a citizen of the new state of Israel. In the meanwhile, I did not at all reject my Palestinian identity. I'm proud to be a Palestinian. I love to be a Palestinian. And what really gives me courage is what I was preaching 25 years ago till now is now being repeated by the Israeli Prime Minister, by the Palestinian leaders. It's time that we share the land together instead of fighting on who owns the land alone.
Well, you're talking about the breakthrough in the agreement represented between Prime Minister Rabin and Nasser Arafat, and I think that's probably going to be what is the most general interest to the public, and how you see that as whether indeed it gives the hope for peace.
You know, what is most interesting in that peace signing is the body language of both leaders. Who showed to everybody that they were losers. Yeah?
Now, how do you interpret that?
And they lost their traditional ways of dealing with each other. I mean, battlefield, violence, terror on both sides. And they have no other alternative but to choose the other way, which is instead of threatening with a fist, to open their hands and to invite the other to give his hand.
Yeah, the symbolism of that was much commented upon, that it took a little while for President Clinton to bring them together and get the handshake going.
Maybe we needed someone, a foreigner, to Islam and Judaism to bring both together to speak about forgiveness and reconciliation. Yeah.
But once their hands were clasped, it represented something far beyond what was happening at that moment.
Absolutely. They generated so much hope everywhere, not only among Palestinians and Jews, but everywhere in the world. This was a kind of open door to a concrete realization of reconciliation. Now, let us not be fascinated by this peace signing. Everything remains to be done. Nothing has been done on the ground. And if it remains a paper, then we will see much more violence generated on both Israeli and Palestinian sides, because then the intransigent groups will become much stronger. It would be a catastrophe, God forbid.
If it doesn't work, it'll be worse.
If it's not implemented, it will be worse. Yeah.
Okay, well, I think that the prayers of us all, of all faith traditions, is that it will work. But to be realistic about how it represents just a starting point, and that if it's not with an advanced recognition of just how much pain and how much misunderstanding and how much, and I would say probably even since the signing of the agreement, there's been bloodshed that shows how hard it is going to be to implement.
Not only bloodshed, there have been some concrete acts of hope and of openness. Many prisoners have been released. Yeah? Now the world powers are competing to help the PLO restructuring and rebuilding the economy of the West Bank. It is very important, and we don't need so much to focus our attention on the negative side of the agreement. Everybody is afraid. Everybody is scared. Hidden agendas are there, but all depends on both negotiating parties how much I am ready to accept and how much I'm ready to make concession on. Yeah?
Okay, so we shouldn't overlook the progress that's been made already. Since
Not at all.
agreement.
It's very important, but it has to be even faster than that. And the more we give, we make some economic improvement for the Palestinians, the less the opposition will be strong on both sides. Because then Israel will feel more secure.
Okay, well, I think that one of the big issues is how to speed up that economic development. And I know that Secretary of State Christopher has been out, you know, among Arab countries saying, let's give financial support to this, this group as we seek to implement the agreement. Do you think that that's off to a good start?
Well, you cannot start with only signing papers. You have to have money and to start on the ground, improve the living situation of the Gaza people and Jericho and the West Bank. And what is really most astonishing is that I heard before yesterday, Israel pledged $25 million to help the PLO. Who could have imagined that 3 weeks ago?
The government of Israel itself.
Yeah. Maybe this is the start of a compensation procedure for the Palestinians everywhere, like Germany did for the Jews, but on another scale.
Right. Now, the interesting thing about that is that up to this point, the Israeli government, in appropriating funds, usually has been for military to secure the territories, occupied territories.
Well, in fact, these were your monies from America sent to Israel to build settlement and to build up a military power that is now absolutely useless, since all the Arab doors are almost opened to the Jews. You remember when Rabin went back from Washington to Israel, he stopped in Morocco and he was unable to stop in Tunisia because of his time. Everything is opened when the Palestinians have their right to existence and to have their flag flown over the West Bank and Gaza.
Well, I think one of the other things, too, after the agreement is that how much the faith community entered into that. I mean, you see it on the political level. But you're working at the grassroots level. You're working with the churches and with the faith tradition of Israel. How much difference has that made in bringing this about?
Well, I don't want here to speak about the different religions, but what concerns me, we are working in Galilee for years with Muslims, Jews, Druze together. In the college where I am the president, we have Jews teaching with us for already 10 years. The daily life of simple citizens is much more simpler than the political map and tensions that is portrayed by the high political scene.
Well, near Nazareth, near where Jesus grew up, you do your work.
Yes.
And it seems to me that one of the ways in which you are seeking to emulate that is to work with people of other convictions, other faith traditions, and show what reconciliation is like every day.
Exactly. And we have in the school 54% of our students that are Muslims. And they are as nice as our Christians. Sometimes I see that they are like our Christians, having 2 eyes, 2 ears. They also have 2 mouths. Yeah? And this is normal, I guess. Yeah?
Do a lot of talking. Huh?
Absolutely.
Well, I think that it's that work that you've been doing over a period of years to help people work together that we want to focus on more as we move into our program. But at this point, I'm afraid we're going to have to take a break, and as we catch our breath, we'll ask all folks to come back with us in just a moment.
Serving Austin means serving you. That has always been the primary goal of Austin Metropolitan Ministries. We are religion in action through the work of these organizations. Each plays a key role in making the capital city a better place to live. But we can't do it alone. Do you have some spare time, talents, or any resources that you can share? If you do, please call AMM at 472-7627 because serving Austin means serving you.
We're back now in Austin Faith Dialogue, talking today to Father Elias Chacour, who is a priest of the Melkite Church in Israel and an advocate for Palestinian rights. I think that just before the break, Father Chacour, we were beginning to talk about your work in particular. And one thing that I read in your book, Blood Brothers, that you led a civil rights demonstration, we call it in this country, in 1972. You went to the Knesset in Jerusalem, and you were, in that way, for a period of several days, seeking to bring to public awareness and consciousness the fact that the folks in your part of the land weren't enjoying the same civil rights as others.
Yeah.
And that's where I think the comparison with Martin Luther King came in, was that you were seeking to do this peacefully. Now, what difference did that make at that time, and has it made sense in terms of your demonstrations?
In fact, that was the first time that Jews and Palestinian Arabs walked together and walked to ask for solidarity with an Arab cause, which is the return of the people, the refugees of Bar'am and Ikrit. And we were all shouting and crying for more solidarity between Jews and Arabs in Israel. And this got stronger and stronger after the several invasions that Israel made to the neighboring countries. Many more peace movements among the Jews appeared, and Arabs were always more and more eager to see more solidarity, more collaboration on a basis of justice and equality. And now in the Knesset, Rabin is the prime minister mainly because the Arabs are supporting him inside Israel.
So he has, even in the Knesset, there are Palestinian voices there that support him?
Oh, without them, Rabin would not be the prime minister now, and he knows that officially.
I see. And then the hope is that that will be expanded so that it's not just a few who are representing. I mean, for instance, in this country, the perception is, what's the name of the woman who's been on the negotiating team?
Hanan Ashrawi.
Yes, and for some reason, her image has become that of the Palestinians in this country.
And it's a beautiful image and a realistic one. Yeah.
And I think you told me before the show that she was a part of a Christian community. And
she is a Christian Orthodox from Ramallah. She is not from Israel. She is from the occupied territories that are to become the independent Palestinian state, side by side with Israel.
For folks who are just trying to get some definitions in mind, the West Bank is what's west of the Jordan River, then in land that is in the northern part, Galilee, and in the southern part is Gaza.
Maybe I would say it in a different way, if you allow me.
All right.
The West Bank includes, for example, Bethlehem, East Jerusalem, Hebron, Jericho, Ramallah, Nablus, just to name some biblical sites. That is on the east side of Palestine. And the Gaza Strip is rather on the other side, on the Mediterranean side of the country. Yeah.
And north and south of Jerusalem, both on the west bank of the Jordan.
Yes, exact. Exact.
Well, I think that once we get a picture geographically in mind, then we begin to get a picture of what has been done to help raise this awareness that is, as is said in the Blood Brothers, what's good actually for the Palestinian is good for the Jews. And I know there are Jewish groups like Peace Now that have been working to see that there's equality and
I'm
justice.
sure you are as aware as I am that the peace signing did not come because of more compassion on both sides. It was made possible because both sides got absolutely sure that with the traditional ways of fighting and killing, they will reach only more fighting and more killing.
It wasn't just political self-interest.
Absolutely not.
It was.
It was that, exactly.
It was that.
Yeah.
But it had to have something else in terms of people having worked together and shown positively what that cooperation.
Well, surely it's because of all the implication, not only of people working together, the blessing that came out of the bitter intifada was to convince both sides it's better to have two states side by side peacefully and interdependent than to continue wanting one state for the Jews or one state for the Palestinians on all of Palestine and having nothing in reality. Yeah?
The Intifada representing the violent resistance.
No, not at all. I disagree with you. Sorry.
Okay.
The Intifada represented mainly the general civil disobedience of the Palestinians and their refusal to be an occupied nation, and after 5 years it ended by becoming violent.
I see.
Yeah.
Didn't start out that way, but became that way.
Exact. Out of despair, because so many tens of thousands were in prison, tortured, became hopeless, and always when you corner a poor person so badly, that person prefers to kick back and die rather than to live coward.
So it was almost a struggle for the soul, in a sense.
Absolutely. Absolutely.
Let's come back to your village, to
Yes.
your area, your building.
Yes.
You're not just a priest in a church who's doing the Mass on Sunday, but tell us the various things that you've done.
Well, in fact, I wanted to rebuild an educational infrastructure for the Palestinian Arab minority inside Israel. And we started 25 years ago with rebuilding libraries, public libraries for the children, because we have 50% of the Palestinian Arabs who are below 14 years old. So we also started building community centers, youth centers, and the last project was to build a small secondary school. We started with 82 students, and now we have 1,420 students. Majority are Muslims.
Yes. Now, these schools, were there no public schools in your area?
No, secondary schools, there were none.
No secondary schools.
In those places, no.
And so you were getting some education going for children who would not have it otherwise.
Most of them would be dropouts from elementary schools and have no opportunity to go to higher education.
Why were there no secondary schools?
Because secondary school, I don't know why. That's what we have to ask the government and the Ministry of Education and the local authorities in the villages, because it's very costly, very expensive, and because they have other priorities that that should not be the real priorities.
Okay, so you want to make sure that the children of your region got a more advanced education.
I think the best guarantee for any peace success would be to have a better educated groups who are opposing each other and who learn to agree to disagree agreeably.
Did you find resistance to starting these schools?
Well, I was never able to get any building permit from the authorities, so I had to choose either to give up or to build without permits. And I chose to build without permit, and later on we managed either to buy the permit, or for the last building we needed to go as far as the White House to ask former Secretary of State Jim Baker to write a letter to Shamir urging him to issue the building permit. And that's how it was done.
You had to go that far before you could get a permit.
These are our next neighbors.
I see. Well, that's interesting. Well, share with us, too, about your vision of the future. We're I think, increasingly turning from the past, and all of not trying to ignore it or to deny it, but to use it to move toward a future, which if you were writing the script, if it were your scenario, Father Chacour, of what the land would look like 25 years from now, how would you describe it?
I would do two things immediately. First of all, build one monument of Holocaust to remind Jews and Palestinians of their suffering and of the necessity to ally together so that this suffering be no more reproduced against anyone on this earth, and to stop playing the victims who need lobby to have more weapons and more money elsewhere.
You're talking about an integrated memorial.
Exactly. That will remind us of our suffering so that we look to the future and not lament the past.
All right.
On the other hand, I see that it is coming to a new reality where a Palestinian state will be living side by side with the Israeli independent and secure state, and both shall be absolutely not viable at all unless interdependent on each other. And we have the feeling, a general feeling on the streets among Palestinians and Jews, although we fought each other for 50 years, we need so badly to be together if we want any future for our children.
So you're really looking forward to a possibility of a prosperity.
Absolutely.
It is hard to imagine even today.
Well, today it is becoming possible to imagine. As soon as the Israelis would accept that the Palestinians have also the same right on Palestine, I think all the doors of the Middle East shall be open to both of us. And we are two very intellectual nations. We can have a great input all over the Middle East.
I think it's also forgotten in this country that throughout the Middle East, the Palestinians have represented a professional class. You talk about the intellectual firepower that's there that can now be wedded with that of Israel to create quite a Middle East center of
Not
civilization.
only that, but now we have some hope that these intellectuals and these skills will be used inside Palestine for the Palestinians instead of building Kuwait to be kicked out and having never had any right to become a Kuwaiti citizen, for example.
Okay. Well, I think that you give us the right to think in great terms and hopeful terms. And I think that as people in Austin hear your conviction, your story, that we'll all be of all faith traditions inspired by it.
Don't give up and don't rest now. It's time to work and time to form and to build peace for all of us.
All right. Thank you for being here to share that
Thank
with
you.
us. And it's been our pleasure today to visit with Father Elias Chacour from the region of Israel where Jesus grew up. As Father Chacour drew inspiration from his teaching of the Lord's and the Beatitudes, blessed are the peacemakers, so may we all find ways to become agents of reconciliation. On behalf of Austin Metropolitan Ministries, I'm Richard Thompson, thanking you for joining us and inviting you to be with us again next week at the same time. Peace be with you.
For more information, call Austin Metropolitan Ministries at 472-762